Good morning. This is Tracy Hales Vass, right on Four Corners. Today I'm excited to talk to Elizabeth Crook, author of several novels. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Tracy. How are you?
I'm just great, and I'm really excited to talk with you. I've been a fan for a while.
Oh, my, thank you.
Yes, I read The Night Journal several years ago and absolutely fell in love with that. And then just recently got finished reading The Which Way Tree, and once again I was spellbound.
Thank you.
Yes,
That's what writers always want to hear. So I
you
really
bet.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you for writing these. Can you give us a quick little synopsis of the books?
Yes. So the Night Journal takes place in two different time frames, the 1980s and the 1890s. And it involves this mystery of a grave that is unearthed out at Pecos Pueblo in New Mexico. This sort of unraveling of a family history, a family legend that happens when they discover what is in the grave. They think they're going to be digging up basically a dog grave, and they find something very different. So this creates kind of a drama among the people in the contemporary part of the story as to what can be done about this and the effect that this has on the family legends. So it
Yes.
was a very different kind of book to write because of having the two time frames and needing to piece together the two plots in a way where they each informed each other and built on each other but didn't give too much away from the from the other plot going on in the story, which was the one in the past.
Right.
And so I actually thought it would be less research to write that book because I thought, well, if I set only half of it in the past, I won't have to be buried in the research books for years and years, which, of course, this was a really stupid idea because you still have to know everything, even
That's
if
true.
only half the book is set, in the past. So anyway, it was a fun book to write, but it took a very long time.
I can see why. It's very well constructed and carefully constructed. There's a lot about the Fred Harvey Hotel and Fred Harvey girls in there. That must have taken some research.
Yes, and the development of the whole railroad
Right,
and
the railroad. Yes.
tourist industry, and then also, that New Mexico at the time was a place where a lot of people who had tuberculosis went to recover because of the high, dry air. And
Right.
so I had a great grandfather who died of tuberculosis, and that's how he had ended up in Texas in the hill country because that also had higher, drier air than where he came from in Mississippi. I had always just kind of heard, that he died of tuberculosis. I didn't know what kind of death that was and what that entailed. And so the research I did for the Night Journal really kind of uncovered for me what he went through and what his family went through, watching him go through this really hideous
Yes.
decline.
And then The Witch Way Tree is a completely different novel.
Completely different. It's funny, my books are all really different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
This one takes place in the 1860s in Texas, right, during and after the Civil War. It involves, the main part of the plot involves these two kids that are tracking a mountain lion that has killed the girl's mother. These
Right.
kids are half brother and sister, and the mountain lion had come to their homestead and attacked the little girl, and the mother went out to defend her daughter and was killed, in that effort. And so this little girl is left very scarred, physically scarred
Mm-hmm.
by the event and bent on revenge. She wants to track and kill this panther. And in the effort, she really drives the whole plot of the story
Yes.
because even though societally she should have been the least powerful of the little posse that goes after the panther, she is the one who makes everything happen and
Yes.
determines the entire story because of her determination and strength of character.
Oh, yeah. She is something. One thing I really love about the book is the voice of Benjamin because it's written in letters as if Benjamin were writing, and his voice is so true.
Yes, he is so he's the brother, and I loved him as a character, and I loved seeing the story through his eyes and his telling, because he's just such an earnest, honest, really beautiful kind of kid. And the book starts with a trial, because at that point in Texas history, during the Civil War, the German settlers who had really populated the towns in that area were opposed to joining the Confederacy. They were pro-Union in their sentiment, and they were really persecuted because of that. And there were many instances of hangings and beatings and real bloodshed. And so there is one true story of these 8 men who were trying to go to Mexico. A lot of the Germans just determined to kind of go to Mexico and get out of the conflict. They did not have any interest in fighting for the Confederacy. Most of them did not own slaves, and some of them didn't even speak English. So here they'd come from Germany to settle, and suddenly they're being, told they have to sign up, to join the Confederacy and go fight. So these 8 were intercepted by Confederate soldiers and were hanged without any kind of trial. It is, Benjamin witnesses the aftermath of this hanging and becomes a prime witness after the close of the war, when the judge was trying war crimes, essentially, during Reconstruction, and Benjamin is asked to testify. So his letters are all to the judge, and they are given as testimony against this one character who he witnessed participating in the hanging.
Right.
So it's written in his voice, and his voice he's uneducated. He's 17 years old when he's writing, but he takes the assignment very seriously, and wrapped up in all the telling of what he witnessed that day and how he knows that this particular Confederate soldier is guilty of participating in this hanging, is the story of the Panther. And he gets very long-winded in his telling, because he starts really loving to sit at night when he doesn't have anything else to do and write to the judge.
He becomes a writer, is what he does. I mean,
he becomes the writer of the story,
right.
And he becomes and he develops this real bond, with imaginary bond in a way, with the judge,
right.
in spending so much time sort of telling this long tale.
It's wonderful. It's really, I got completely wrapped up in the tales and the adventures and the crazy things that happen in the search of the Panther, interwoven with Hanlon's story, the bad guy.
It's very action-driven.
It is.
And one of the things that I figured out about writing in first person, which I usually actually don't care for first-person narratives, because they so often come across as as self-absorbed, the narrator, if he's telling a story about himself.
Right.
And it's like somebody spending a long time telling you some story about themselves. And Benjamin is telling a story about his sister and
right.
about this murder. And he's not at all self-pitying, self-absorbed. He takes his life, really very philosophically. And even though it's a difficult life, and he lives in, poverty with his sister, trying to eke out a living, he just is so refreshing as a character. And I found that in telling this through his point of view, I could leave out anything extraneous, because a 17-year-old kid is not going to describe things. He's just going to say what happened and who did it.
That's
what
right.
they said and what they did, and it makes the story move very quickly. It's a short book, really, and it moves very quickly, because I had to keep in mind, what would a 17-year-old, how would they tell this story?
Wow.
And that made it a lot of fun and relieved me of, having to include a lot of detail. The description comes through in very sort of unusual ways, simply because Benjamin, knows his life so well, but he's not going to say how they lit the fire if they make a fire. He's just going to say, we made a fire.
Right.
And, and in writing historical fiction, so often authors feel compelled to give description as to how it happened. And I was relieved of that sense of duty, because Benjamin wouldn't.
Oh, and it comes across great. That's really a good tip on not having to go through the sometimes those parts where readers skip.
Right, right. No, I don't think there's anything that you would, that a reader would want
Absolutely
to skip,
not.
because it's just all, is of one piece. And as the other two main characters come into the hunt for the panther, they play such an integral role. And of course, while they're tracking the panther, this Confederate soldier is tracking them.
Right.
And so it kind of creates this sense of momentum and drama that is easy to relay in Benjamin's voice because he's telling this at a pace.
Right. So I have one question for you about that. Robert Duvall?
So when I finished the manuscript, I took it to a friend of mine, Stephen Harrigan, who's a writer, and he and I, always look at each other's things as we're writing, and asked him if he would take another look before I sent it to my agent. And he said he knew somebody who was working with Duvall, that and that they were looking for material, and he just thought maybe Duvall would like this story. So we just at that point right then emailed this friend, and he said, sure, I'll take a look at it. And then we sent it on over, just a rough draft, just over email to him. He really liked it, so he showed it to Mr. Duvall, and who read it and liked it and said he wanted to option this. And so it's currently, under option with him. And then he asked who should write the screenplay, and I said, well, my friend Steve Harrigan, because he knows the story and he knows how to write screenplays.
Great.
I have no knowledge of the movie business, but Steve was very busy and said that he didn't have time and he would do it if I would do it with him. So we've written the screenplay together. And and so it's been fun, and working with Bob Duvall. I mean, he's just so dynamic, and he knows exactly what he wants, and he is so on top of things. I mean, every time we sent him a draft, he would read it right away. Within 48 hours, we'd be on a conference call. Yeah,
that's great.
And so I was really impressed with his just instincts about the storytelling and how to make it all fit. And I feel a lot of appreciation to him, whether or not it becomes a movie. I mean, you never know in the movie business, how things are going to happen. There's a lot of pieces to fall into place, but so far I'm having a really good time with it.
So has he made any suggestions you just did not want to go along with?
Well, it was sort of a team because there were two other producers working with him. So and then the director he chose. So we would all be on the phone at the same time. Everybody would throw out ideas, and everybody felt pretty free to, kind of knock them around and take them or not. Usually, I mean, he had the he had the upper hand in everything, as you would expect. But there was nothing that he wanted to do that I thought was a bad idea.
That's great.
So it's been a very cohesive, working experience and a good feeling.
That's good. Keeps to the heart of what your intentions were then.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, he sees the story as I see the story.
That's great.
And
yes.
And so that's made it really fun. And also, I had to, from the very beginning, my feeling was the book is my book. I mean, if anybody wanted to change something or do something that I didn't like, I just wouldn't do it.
Right.
But the movie is their movie, and so I don't feel the same, territorial kind of instincts toward it. I feel like that's a collaborative effort, and that the characters will become whoever's playing the part will take over to some extent and steer that character in perhaps a different direction. And that's okay with me. It would be really exciting to see it, the characters that you've thought of and sort of lived with every day from morning to night when you're working, to see them be actual real people on on a movie set. I just think it would be really exciting, and I hope it happens. I don't know what it will, but I'm hopeful. Yeah.
And my thought is, I wonder who will play Benjamin.
I do too. I mean, I just kind of hold my breath about that. And
right.
They will have to, they'll audition,
Of course.
have an audition for a lot of people and see, but I just, want, I have him in my mind, and it's going to be really hard for me to have a different image in my mind of him,
Absolutely. I can imagine that would be
when I see a real
tricky.
face, but
Right.
it'll be fun.
I think we all, as writers, aspire to that. Somebody wanting to make a movie at it, and we all have I don't know if they're going to change it too much. We have that ownership.
That sense of it. I really don't. I had a writer I knew many, many years ago had his, book made into a movie, and some people didn't like the movie and liked the book better, and some people vice versa. And I said, what do you think, of what they did in the movie? And he said, people always ask me, what do you think about what they did to your book? And I tell them, my book is just as I wrote it right there on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody did anything to my book. And so that, has kind of been the attitude I've adopted, that even if it were to turn out that I didn't like the movie, which I think would be surprising because, they've been so great about, asking, me to stay as a participant in the writing.
Oh, that's nice.
That's really nice. And also, really wanting me to be happy with what we've done. There hasn't been any sense of taking it away. And often I think it goes away from a writer where they have no control. And
I've heard that.
So far this team is just so lovely and nice, that we've all worked together really well. And I haven't felt, at any point overridden or like the story or the characters have been snatched out of my control.
Oh, that's so exciting. Would you like to read a little bit?
Here is when they're on the hunt,
mm-hmm.
and there's dissension between Lorenzo Pacheco.
Okay.
So he and Samantha, the little girl, Sam as she's called, want to continue the hunt, and Benjamin and the preacher Dobb,
mm-hmm.
want to turn back. What's happened is that the dog that is tracking for them, has been sprayed by a skunk, so he can't smell. His paws are pretty much worn off.
Good old Zechariah.
Zechariah, and the weather is turning bad, and so they want to turn. They think, and they're also encroaching on Indian territory, and so they start feeling this is dangerous. And Benjamin and Preacher Dobb think it's time now to give up this hunt and turn back. And Samantha and Lorenzo Pacheco, who's kind of a Tejano who's wanted for horse theft, which basically he is not guilty of, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
They want to keep going and give up under no circumstances. So they've had an argument about it. They've tried to sleep, and they're waking up in the morning. We awoke to a cloudy day and the stink hanging over the canyon. See, the dog stinks really bad because of the skunk.
Mm-hmm.
My hopes was not high. Those of Preacher Dobb pretty well gone. Mr. Pacheco's wrung out a bit, but not yet hung to dry. And Sam's the same as ever, not so passing as to be swept off by an odor on account of she was bent on killing that panther no matter what misfortune might befall. Whilst Mr. Pacheco stirred up the fire, Preacher Dobb gone up to the rim to look after Zechariah, and then come down and made coffee in a miserable frame of mind. He said, I am sorry to break the news to you good people, but I see no use in continuing our hunt when we have lost the trail and have no way of finding it again. Zechariah smells too bad himself to sniff out a panther nor anything else. I could lay a chunk of steak in front of that dog and he would not know it was there. I'm for turning back. Sam did not appear to listen to any of that. She sat working a prickly pair of thorns in her hands and did not make any reply at all. However, I was pretty sure of her thoughts. I said, Sam, you got to listen to reason. She commenced to hum some tune she knew. I will tell you what, it was irksome the way she sat there with her hair sticking out all over her head like a bunch of switchgrass and just worked at her fingers. I said, that is not an answer and it ain't polite. She said, if you want to be woebegone and cowards, then fine, but I got better things to do than turn back. I was ashamed having a girl talk to me like that in earshot of others. I pointed out that she had no horse. I walked fine, she said. I said, nobody is going to leave you to follow the panther afoot. You can't outwalk a panther. She neither looked at me nor answered, but hummed her tune. Mr. Pacheco laughed at her being ornery, and I said, it ain't funny. She is muy fuerte, he said. I asked what that was. He said, she is a very strong girl. She was a great deal of trouble, was what she was, and I told him so. But Mr. Pacheco was in agreement with her and did not want to turn back. The pinto would not mind an extra passenger, no bigger around than a blade of grass, he said, and Sam was welcome to ride with him. I have put my dog through too much already, Preacher Dog said. He's had a good time remembering the days of his youth and getting the panther scent in his nose once again. But the party is over for him and me and my horse. The panther will be long gone by now, and without a useful panther dog, we are more likely to get lost than to find it, and this is not an area I want us lost in. There's too much chance of coming across Indians. I figured we was lost already. I could hardly tell which direction was forward and which was back, and could not so much as see the direction of the sun for the clouds. We was at the bottom of a canyon that looked like any other, in the middle of no place as far as I could make out. I figured either Preacher Dobb or Mr. Pacheco could track us backwards and get us home, even if I could not, but none of us was going back without Sam. We was in deadlock. We paused from argument and ate cornbread Ida had packed and pecans that was dropped, and Preacher Dobb went up to get Zechariah and bring him down to wash him again, as he did not want to head in any direction whatsoever with the dog still smelling as bad as he done. We was none of us getting along. There was a good many tense words when Preacher Dobb come back down with that foul-smelling dog. Sam and Mr. Pacheco was strongly for trailing down the canyon a ways, and Preacher Dobb and me was both certain that to do so would only mean traveling further into dangerous territory, that when we had no chance of catching up with a panther that was likely 100 miles off by now. We pitched in and done our part washing Zechariah again, and the dog put up with us better than the night before. But I was feeling ill-treated and wrathful with Sam for making it so clear to everybody that I would have to either leave her behind or hog-tie her and take her against her will, when I could not do neither. I might as well have been hog-tied myself for all the say-so I had over her. And then they go about washing the dog there. Mm-hmm. He says, Sam continued to argue her claim, saying, I have my 4-shot pepper box, and you won't see me going back. Preacher Dobb said, little girl, it is my pepper box, and it was only borrowed to you. She said, it was borrowed to me to shoot the panther. Until I've done so, it's mine, unless you're Indian, Gibber. He said, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. She said, I favor the hide over grace. I don't give a snap about grace. I told Preacher Dobb I'm sorry she has no respect for her elders. Preacher Dobb then led Zechariah out of the water and tied him to a low branch of a big sycamore alongside the creek and said, we are at cross purposes here. We have consulted the wishes of all and fallen to disagreement and found ourselves at an impasse. There is but one amongst us who has not yet been called on nor heard from, and that is the Lord. We would do well to call upon him. Preacher Dobb then gathered us under the sycamore, and we took our hats off and bent our heads, all except Sam, who did not bend hers, and we heeded the preacher's words, although I feared Sam would not be swayed to the Lord's verdict if it should be other than what she wanted. So then, in the next page, we find out how the Lord answers this prayer, and the verdict of whether of what they're going to do.
Yes, very clearly. Well, that's been wonderful. Tell us a little bit about what else you've written.
It spans. I was thinking the other day, I've been writing books for 30 years now. The first one is called The Raven's Bride, and it is about Sam Houston's very disastrous marriage. There was a young woman he married while he was governor of Tennessee, before he ever set foot in Texas, and she left him after 11 weeks, and nobody ever really knew why. There was some kind of something that went on, and it could be just that she never loved him. There were a lot of theories, but he was so devastated, and he was so vilified by people who assumed that maybe he had mistreated her, that he was that he resigned the governorship in disgrace and left on a steamboat and eventually ended up in Texas. And then you had Battle of San Jacinto, and Texas is sort of, the map is drawn the way it is drawn.
Oh.
And a lot of it goes back to this ill-fated marriage.
Oh, exciting.
So that was a novel. And the second one deals with the Texas Revolution and the Hispanic families, who were divided in their sentiments about it. Many were spying for Santa Anna's forces as they advanced from the south, and others, for the other side, were fighting on the other side. And so it deals with the massacre at Goliad most specifically, when a number of the Anglo fighters were captured and killed. And then there was the Night Journal. And then there was another book, Monday, which deals with 1960s, the tower shooting. It was really the first, school shooting when, Charles Whitman went up into the University of Texas tower and shot so many people on the ground. And so it begins with that, and it traces the lives of three individuals, really four individuals, who are brought together during this event, and how this then plays out in a lot of ways in their lives.
Oh my goodness!
So that's all of the books. So it takes me a long time to write a book, because of the research and just figuring out directions. The direction to take the story. I'm not a writer that has a whole story in mind when I start. It's usually very rudimentary ideas, and then just kind of feeling my way and figuring out sometimes at the end of a chapter, what's going to happen next,
Right.
And so it's not with a plot. You write. Do you write? Do you know what you're doing when you start?
No, not at all. I let it evolve and become what it will, which may be good or not, depending on. There's always revision.
I've decided that it's more fun to write that way, because with the plot it's kind of like doing the dot to dot.
Exactly.
Exactly. And this is this way you end up in places you didn't think to go.
That's right.
You discover things along the way, and kind of. So I find it a little more the word maybe organic. Just where it just kind of grows on its own and unencumbered, but it's also, I think, a very inefficient way to write.
I do too.
I think,
it is.
I think you couldn't be very prolific, and I'm not very prolific. If you took this much time to kind of grope your way along through the story, and then backtrack and cut that chapter out and decide to go a different direction, which is something or halfway through the book decide that one character is really dispensable, and you can just kind of get them out of every scene they're in, and the story rocks along just fine without them. So, it's not efficient to write that way, but it's interesting. So
it is interesting.
It's the only way I know how to do it.
That's right. And like I said, a lot of revision, but that way you get to know the characters and know the story. Right.
And, one will emerge as more of a character than you thought, and others, you find out kind of fade into the background, and, you can do away with them or keep them or whatever, but they're not, they're not the figure that you thought that they were going to be in the beginning.
That's right. Oh, that's exciting. And we are just about out of time.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to add in the last couple of minutes?
No, you've asked really nice questions, and I've enjoyed talking. I hope I didn't just yammer on too long.
No, it's been a pleasure to listen to you, and I will definitely read these other books of yours.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. They're very different, so I think some people would like some and not like others. So I recommend, if it's not your cup of tea, just put it down.
Oh.
That's what I do with books that I can't, get into. So I never mind if somebody does that with one of mine.
Well, I like your voice and your style, so even though it's different every time.
It's different every time.
Right.
I appreciate that, Tracy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We've been talking to Elizabeth Crook, author of The Night Journal and her new book, The Which Way Tree. This is Tracy Hales Vass, right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM, Farmington. You can contact me at writeon@sanjuancollege.edu.